At the beginning of the class, we talked about the course being kind of loosely based on the Vitruvian triad, those three words that Vitruvius established as criteria for architecture centuries ago. So we talked about firmness, commodity, delight as the Vitruvian triad. We kind of rephrased delight to be issues of form, and that was kind of the first 1/3 of the class. Then we rephrased firmness to be issues of physical considerations. That was kind of the middle of the class. And now the last 1/3 of the class is going to be on issues of commodity, or what we're going to be calling human factors. So when people think of what architecture should do, many people would say it's all about function. Buildings need, first and foremost, to be functional. And in some ways, that's exactly what we're talking about in this segment on human factors, or commodity. How do buildings respond to functional needs of human beings? And that's a huge set of issues in architecture. So that might include things like, are the rooms arranged in such a way that it's convenient and efficient and practical? It also might mean things like, does it make me feel productive, or does it make me feel happy or good or depressed or sad? So it's a kind of psychological, there's a psychological aspect to this segment on human factors. It also could be about, does it make it easy for me to find a community of people I like associating with? Does it help me make friends? That's a kind of sociological side of human factors. It also could be about, does it help me reach self-actualization? Does it enhance my ability to become who I want to become and reach my best person? Those are all human factors, and those are all things that are tied into architecture and architectural design. So that's really the set of issues we're going to be looking at over the next few talks, issues of human factors. And we're going to start that with a segment today on the designation and organization of use. Now, there seems to be something just intrinsic in not only human beings, but many animals, that make us want to designate certain places for certain activities, and then to maybe organize those so that it creates a kind of lifestyle. And it's amazing in the animal world, a bird will return to the same place over and over and over to make their nest and have their babies. They have designated that place as the right place for having my babies and nurturing them. Primates in particular are very sophisticated in their designation and organization of uses. They will have certain areas where they eat their food. They'll have other areas where they sleep, and they do that on a regular basis. They'll have other areas where they seem to be playing games and recreating and having fun. So if you just look at primate behavior, it's amazing how they have organized the physical environment to create a kind of lifestyle for themselves. And in human beings, this seems to be incredibly, incredibly important. This is something we need to do, and is very useful for us to do. I lived for a while in Australia, and when I was there, I was very enamored of the Aborigine culture that's there. And I made many trips out to the outback to visit and talk with Aborigines. And the stories I'm going to be telling for the next few minutes are really, they come from these Aborigine stories as they told them to me. I'm not 100% sure they're completely accurate, but it was their perception of the way Aborigines relate to these notions of designation and organization of use. So they told me that, they have always been nomadic people. so that they would move from place to place. And because they lived in the outback in Australia, where it's a lot desert and not very productive land, they would need, in order to get the kind of resources they had to have to live, they needed to go from place to place to do that. And it was also a fairly salubrious climate. It wasn't terribly hot. Well, it was quite hot, but they were accustomed to the heat. And it didn't get terribly cold. So they didn't really have much need for buildings. And they actually didn't build buildings as we think of them. Remarkably, not even significantly tents or dugouts or anything like that. They would often just live in the open. And some people would say, well, they didn't have any architecture. They didn't have any buildings. They don't have architecture. I would definitely argue with that. I think they had very sophisticated architecture. It just wasn't buildings. It was more about how they designate and organize uses. So when they were nomadic and when they came to a new area, the leaders of the clan would say, okay, well, this area from that boulder here to that little stream over there, that's going to be the sacred spot. And that's where we're going to have our rituals and our spiritual life. And this area over here between those alder trees and that clump of bushes, that's going to be the place for the young men to hang out. And that's where they can, have their space and do their thing over there. And this area over here between that rock outcropping and that ledge, that's going to be the place where the young women can hang out and they can do their thing over here. And this space between the stream and these little row of rocks, that's going to be the cooking area. And that's where we're going to cook communally for everyone, and that's where we'll eat. And so they would set out all of these spaces for all of these functions. And to me, that's very much architecture. They were making a physical environment based on the designation and organization of uses. And according to them, that was for them very much architecture. Now, at a certain point, according to these people I was talking with, maybe about the 50s or 60s, the colonial people in Australia, the Aborigines were native people, the colonial people, and the colonial people and the native people had always been pretty separate. The colonial people were along the coast in the cities, and the Aborigines tended to be more toward the center of the continent. So there really, in many ways, was not much interaction between the two for centuries. But then by the 1950s or 1960s, there began to be more interaction. And the government, which by now was independent from Britain, but was the population that had been the colonial population, their government, looked at the Aborigines and said, oh my God, this is terrible. They don't have any houses. We need to help them. We need to get them some houses. So they talked with them a little bit, and then they decided, okay, we're going to build them some decent housing. So they built some houses out in the area where the Aborigines live. And they built very traditional Australian, what they call brick and tile houses. Red brick walls, red tile roofs. There's a very conventional Australian house, a good brick and tile house. Probably 2 or 3 bedrooms, almost always one bath, no matter how many people were in there, one bath, kitchen, living room, all those normal kinds of spaces. So they built some of these and they said, move in, they're yours. So the Aborigines moved in, started living in them, and the colonial people came back a little later and said, whoa, what the heck have these people done? They're destroying these houses we gave them. And they had actually cut a hole in the roof, like above the living room, and they had, in the minds of the people who built those houses, they destroyed them. But as they began to talk with the people who lived in the houses, they said, well, we always cook communally. I mean, it seems ridiculous to us to think of, like one little family of 4 people would cook by themselves and eat by themselves. That's silly. That's really inefficient and downright antisocial. we cook as a clan together, so 20 or 30 people, and several different families, and we all cook together and we all eat together. And that tiny little kitchen thing, that wasn't big enough for more than one person to be in, and we have more people than that who are cooking here. So the only room that was big enough to cook in really was the living room. And so we moved the stove in there, and then we needed an exhaust so the heat could get out. So we had to cut a hole in the ceiling for that to exhaust. And it works fine for us, but you know, that other house, I mean, in its form you gave us, it didn't work for us at all. And then they also realized that, oh my God, everybody's sleeping in freaking one bedroom. We gave them 3 bedrooms, and they're all sleeping in one bedroom. And again, they said, well, gee, I mean, we always sleep together as a family, and we wouldn't want to be separate. We have great conversations at night when we're going to sleep. We comfort each other. We sleep together. And so we're not going to be one person in each room. That's very lonely and isolating. So this was a conflict between a lifestyle, a way of life of the Aborigines, and then moving into a physical environment that was built for another way of life and did not accommodate their way of life. Now, I want to just make a kind of happy ending to that story and let you know that there then have been, since then, houses that have been developed with this need of the Aborigines and this life of the Aborigines in mind, and at the same time, to some extent, taking on some characteristics of Western culture as well. So this is the Marika Alderton House. It was designed by Glenn Murcutt in the 1990s. And in this case, we looked at Glenn Murcutt when we were looking at synthesis of physical considerations. And this is just as climate responsive and very, very responsive to physical considerations, just like the Simpson Lee house that we looked at then. So it's catching every breeze. It actually does not have windows and doors because they were accustomed to living in the open and very connected to nature. But it's very, very much about relying on inspiration from physical considerations. But it also is looking at the lifestyle of the Aborigines very seriously. So this is the plan of that house. Again, long faces north and south, short faces east and west, very climatically responsive. But right here is the living room and cooking space. So again, one big space. And it's a big room. You can get 20 or 30 people in there to eat, or you can get 6 or 8 people cooking here very easily. And it really reflects that kind of clan living that the Aborigines were accustomed to. And then this half of the house is kind of about sleeping. And there are, as you'll see, very low partitions between these sleeping areas. But it also is sufficiently open that acoustically you can talk to each other and hear each other. And so there's a little bit of privacy, but really still that kind of communal sleeping kind of area there with just the bathroom facilities right here. So that's what it looks like inside. This is that big cooking, eating area right here. You can see that it's all open. The partitions don't go all the way up to the ceiling. They don't close off those sleeping spaces, but leave them like a kind of dormitory, open dormitory kind of sleeping area back there for the family. There are other really cool things about Aborigine life that are kind of baked into the Marika Alderton house that I love. So there's a tradition in a traditional Aborigine village where, because they don't have buildings, if someone is sort of encamped over here and you would like to visit them, what you do is you would go and sort of amble over and stand maybe, 20 or 30 feet away from them and just kind of stand there and hang out. And they could tell that you're like available. And if they want to socialize and they say, yo, Larry, come on over. And I come over and we visit together. But if they feel like being alone or they're busy, they're doing something else, they just kind of ignore me. And I realize after a few minutes, okay, they're not into socializing right now, and I go away. So that actually seems a lot more polite than when you knock on somebody's door and they kind of have to answer. This is a very, very nice, gentle association of people together. So in this house, Glenn Murcutt is providing the same thing. The screen right here is here where you can be inside and you can see outside very well through the screen. But on the outside, you can't see in very well. So somebody can come and they can just stand out there and make themselves available, and then you can see them and you can either invite them in or you can ignore them for a few minutes and they'll know to go away. So that ritual of socialization is built into the Marika Alderton house. Just in so many ways, this is about designating and organizing uses exactly like the culture and the people want it done, and not just in a more generic kind of way. Now, I want to think for a few minutes about this notion of why is it so important to designate and organize uses? What is it in us that seems so fundamental in this regard? And I would say we accomplish three things by designating and organizing uses. And these are eternal verities. This is true of humankind over most cultures and over centuries of history and all over the world. The first thing is we designate and organize uses for practical reasons. It's just practical. And that is because if I'm cooking over an open fire over here and I have children playing, I do not want the children playing by the open fire. It's dangerous. It's much more practical to designate this area for cooking and this area for children playing. And when a child goes out of their play area, they're corrected and they're herded back into their play area in order to keep them safe. It's practical to have that designation and organization of uses. A second reason is it's a way of a culture injecting cultural norms or taboos in the culture. So in that Aborigine example where they said this place over here is for the young guys to hang out and this place over here is for the young women to hang out, that was just freaking birth control. Because you have 13, 14, 15, 16-year-old guys and girls. If you have them hanging out together, they get friendly, they get curious, and pretty soon you have babies. And in Aborigine culture, they could not have babies at a young age because they needed birth control. They needed a way to reduce the population because they had limited resources for that population to depend on. So they built into their culture these norms or these taboos. And if a young guy started hanging out with the young women, that was not acceptable. So they designated and organized the uses in order to keep those young guys and young women apart so that then there would be some form of birth control. Not perfect, but certainly an encouragement of a kind of birth control. So many of our exercises in designating and organizing uses are about cultural norms and taboos. And then a third reason is that this is a way of claiming a space. By organizing it like that, I say this is mine. I'm in control of this space. It's a way of me asserting my individuality and my authority as a person. And this is very powerful. Even a tiny little kid kind of needs that. You see a kid that maybe goes into the living room and they're playing around and they got a little fantasy in their head, and you walk in there and you sit down in a chair and they say, oh, no, Daddy, you can't sit in that chair. That's the teacher's chair. And this is a classroom, and the teacher sits there. So you need to sit somewhere else. And that's that kid claiming that space, making it their own and giving some kind of personal authority to that space. So this is just a human need. So we designate and organize uses in a very universal and traditional sense for practicality, to inject cultural norms and taboos, or to claim space. Now, in contemporary society, we probably go a little further than that. Because now, and very different from, say, the Aborigines, we're very concerned about convenience and efficiency and time. And we want to be able to do what we do in a very efficient way. If I have to go 30 steps to the printer from my desk, that's too far. I shouldn't have to go more than 15 steps to a printer. That's convenient, that's efficient. If I get up in the middle of the night and I have to take a leak, I don't want to go down the hall and downstairs to get to the bathroom. I want to be able to roll out of bed, go to the bathroom, and get back in the bed and get back to sleep. That's convenient. We're very concerned about convenience and efficiency these days. And the way we designate and organize uses can make our life way more convenient and efficient than if that's done in a haphazard or less effective way. So a contemporary reason for designating and organizing uses is in order to provide that kind of convenience and efficiency. And then a final reason, I think now, that's true today, not true for all times or all places, but certainly true in our culture, is that we have all these accoutrements. We have all these machines, and we have to designate certain spaces for certain activities because we're assisted by all these machines. So now in a kitchen, we've got to have the sink and the disposal and the dishwasher and the microwave and the oven and the cooktop and the, all of these different accoutrements that we need for cooking. And that means that we have to organize certain spaces, the bathroom, the bedroom, the kitchen, all of these, because those activities we do now require equipment, and that equipment is often fixed and it needs to be in a place. So today, maybe more than ever before, designation and organization of uses is super important to us, not only for practicality and cultural taboos and claiming, as has always been the case, but also now because we want convenience and efficiency, and because we've got all these machines and equipment that we need to put in a place to accommodate the uses that we have there. So more than ever, probably, this is a really, really fundamental part of making architecture, how we identify activities, behaviors, and we organize them into systems and order in order to make buildings. Now, I want to close today by then linking this back to how it makes a whole building, not just a floor plan, not just that sort of diagram of activities, but the actual architectural character of the building can be fundamentally, very, very significantly shaped by these human factors of designation and organization of uses. So I want us to look, and this has been the case for centuries, forever. This has been an element that shapes and forms architecture. So I want us to look at a couple of Renaissance buildings and how human factors, how the designation and organization of uses was shaping those buildings. We looked several talks ago at Santa Maria della Fiore, one of the very early Renaissance buildings in Florence. At the same time as that was happening, there was also a revolution happening not only in church design, but also in residential design. So one of the pioneers here was Leon Battista Alberti, and he designed in 1451 the Palazzo Rucellai that we see right there. And this was a very early expression of function in the facade and in the architectural character of the building, an expression of use that was coming in the visual character of the building. So in these days, you have to think of what Florence was like there. Now, this neighborhood in Florence, yeah, the ground floor of the shops are like Ferragamo and Gucci, and it's a very expensive part of town and very shishi. But back in Renaissance times, or really the late medieval times then, This would have been probably a kind of muddy, nasty street. Of course, all the transportation would have been by animals. So there'd be horses in that street. There'd be horse poop around in the street. It would have been a very mixed community, not she wealthy community like it is now. So there would probably have been a whole range of beggars and other people that were around in there. It was smelly, it was noisy, it was often unpleasant on the streets of Florence at the time. So if you're thinking of, I'm making a nice palace for this extended family, and they're going to live here, what do I want to put next to the street? What functions should go there? Well, I definitely don't want my bedroom next to that smelly, nasty street. I definitely don't want to entertain my guests next to that smelly, nasty street. So the whole bottom floor of the Palazzo Rucellai became the stables for their horses, the places where they stored the grain to feed the horses, the places where they stored the coal to fire their heaters. The servants' quarters were down there. All of those more utilitarian functions were on the lower floor. And they had very small windows, very high, almost fortified, so that you keep out the riffraff, because there's plenty of riffraff the Rucellai family didn't want to be dealing with day to day. And you just make a place where a carriage can go in to a courtyard, drop people off, and the carriage can come out right there. Otherwise, very solid, very fortified kind of feeling at the ground floor. And functions there that did not need light or air or communication with the outside. Then on the second floor, or what was called the noble floor, the piano nobile, then they would put those spaces where they would entertain guests. So the guests would come in their carriage, they would come out in the courtyard, go up a beautiful stair in the courtyard, and then go to these rooms that were the music room and the dining room and the salon and the library and those kinds of rooms that would be on the piano nobile. And then up at the very top would be the rooms for the family themselves, the bedrooms, the suites that mom and dad, the kids, and it's an extended family. So it would be more than one, like grandma, grandpa too. And they're up on the top floor up there. Now, the architectural character of this, with that solid lower floor, the grand piano nobile up above it, and a very different treatment of the floors vertically, this is coming from function. It's coming from the designation and organization of uses within the building. The architect of Santa Maria della Fiore was, of course, Brunelleschi, and this is a similar palace designed by Filippo Brunelleschi in Florence. It's on the other side of the Arno River from the Palazzo Rucellai, but done about the same time. And in this case, this is a much larger family, wealthier family. They've got a very extensive area down at the bottom here that's all about stables and storage and all of their goods and operations down here. They've got a very large piano nobile that's all about entertainment. But of course, they've only got a limited number of rooms for family members because family's not that big. So now the massing of the building is even stepping up from this huge operations floor, this quite large entertainment floor, and then the much smaller family floor. And they're treating them very differently. On the bottom, there are these boulders, really kind of rugged stones. As you go higher, it gets much more refined stone and seems much more kind of civilized and gracious. But at the bottom, it, again, fortified, kind of rustic looking. So the architectural character of the Palazzo Pitti is very much based, again, on function, on designation and organization of use. So at about the same time as the Palazzo Rucellai was being done, across the Arno River in another part of Florence, they're building the Palazzo Pitti. And again, many of the same things are applied in the Palazzo Pitti. So the ground floor is very much all those functions of stables and servants and storage and heating, coal, all of that goes down there. On the second level is the piano nobile. This is where the rooms for entertainment and kind of gracious spaces for friends to come. They're on the piano nobile there. And then at the very top, that's the floor for the family. And again, you know, they've got a huge kind of operations floor. They've got a big space for entertainment. But there's only so many family members, and so they don't need quite so much space up here. So now even the massing of the building is all about designation and organization of uses. What uses go here? How big are they? What uses go here? What extent are they? What uses go here and what extent are they? And then in the same way, architecturally, just as in the Palazzo Rucellai, the lower floor feels very fortified, rather small openings through here. It's utilitarian. It even has the kind of rusticated stone, much rougher than the more dressed stone up above. And the architecture, the expression of the building is coming very much from the difference of the function here and the function that's here. So the bottom line of this talk is how important it is, this notion of designating and organizing uses, how fundamental it is to human culture over a long period of time. But then also how much a part it plays in creating real architectural character and how inspiring it can be for making architectural form. Okay, see you next time.